Everyone, I'm Becky. I'm founder and CEO here at Reflect Digital. We're a digital marketing agency and we're here to help unleash your potential. So we specialize in leveraging human behavior insights to optimize the customer experience and to level up digital marketing campaigns. So that could be anything from SEO to paid media, to your email marketing campaigns, any ways you communicate, and you're going to get lots of ideas on those today. So today we want it to be as interactive as possible. So if you have got questions, you can pop them in the chat. We will do questions at the end, depending on how much time we've got, but by all means, pop them in as you go, because then if you're anything like me, I kind of have a question, and if I don't do it straight away, I'll forget it. So start popping them in there and we'll come to them at the end. If we run out of time, we'll make sure that we follow up with those afterwards. So today we're talking about increasing charitable donations with behavioural science, which at the core is about empathy and how you go about driving empathy in donations. Because we all know how tough it is, and especially at the moment in the current climate, to drive donations. So we want to look at why people might not be donating, and ways and tricks and tips that we can use in our messaging, in the way that we format our ads, the images that we use, all of these different types of ideas of how we might be able to get cut through and drive donations. So today I'm really pleased to be joined by Dr. Kiran Webster, who is a behavioural strategist here at Reflect Digital. She joined our team back in January and has been a fantastic addition to our team, and she's really driving the behavioural science in the business, which is super exciting. So she's got a PhD in psychology from the University of Kent. That PhD was part funded by a national education charity, the Anne Frank Trust, and her experience prior to moving into the digital space with us here at Reflect was as a behavioural scientist in government, so both at Public Health England and the Department for Education. So she's got a huge array of experience when it comes to thinking about behavioural science and behavioural change. So I'm going to stop talking and be able to hand over to Kiran. So thank you so much, Kiran. I'm going to go on mute and take it away. We'll let you share your slides.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Becky, for that lovely intro. So welcome everyone. I'm Kiran, and obviously I'm going to be talking to you today about increasing charitable donations using behavioural science. So just the usual check. Can you see my slides okay? Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So, there we go. So the first question some of you might be wondering is, what is behavioural science, if you haven't really kind of ventured into this field yet? Well, it's the scientific understanding of human behaviour, so why we do the things that we do. And we attempt to understand the drivers and barriers of behaviour. So there's quite often some kind of hidden or not so obvious reasons why we do the things that we do. And there'll be unconscious things that motivate us to do a behaviour and unconscious things that prevent us from doing a behaviour. And as behavioural scientists, that's what we attempt to understand. What are those drivers and barriers, and how can we work with them? Plenty of research in this field has shown that humans are irrational. And what I mean by this is we're often driven by our kind of irrational emotions, thoughts, beliefs, judgments, desires, all of those sorts of things to do the things that we do. But the good news is we're predictably irrational. So what that means is that using all of the evidence and research, we can make educated predictions about how people might behave using their kind of irrational biases, and we can work with them. So the research has also shown, in a nutshell, I like to describe us as humans are lazy, we're biased, and we are deeply flawed. And there's actually a really good reason that we are lazy and we use shortcuts and we're a bit flawed. And that's because decision making is really exhausting. Trying to make a decision about something and all of our choices is actually really mentally taxing. And research has shown that we make an estimated 35,000 conscious choices a day. And that's just the conscious ones. So if we stop and think for a moment about the unconscious choices, like which leg to get out of bed first, or even the act of blinking. Blinking is a behaviour. Those are unconscious. We just do them naturally. But imagine if we had to consciously think about it in order to do it. We wouldn't survive. Okay, so that's the reason that we are relying on shortcuts and just instinctive, unconscious kind of things that tell us what to do. But sometimes that also gets in the way of good decision making. So what behavioural science attempts to do is to work with those human flaws and not against them to address the situation and move people towards the desired behaviour. So if we take the really, really simplistic example of imagining you are in a room with a big red shiny button in the middle of the room, and I've told you, do not press that button until I get back. I might have even left a big sign that says, do not press this button, and I leave. We would all be fighting the urge to go and press that button. And some of us might not win that fight, and we might go and press that button. Now, obviously, this is a really simplistic and obvious example, but it just shows that even though we know and we've been educated, we've been informed that we shouldn't press that button, some of us will still go and do it. So thinking from a behavioural science perspective, we might do things to not throw more information and education at the person, but we might try things like making the button a little less attractive or a little less obvious. So changing the colour, making it smaller. Or we might make that button a little bit harder to get to as well. So hopefully now you've got a really, really brief understanding of what behavioural science is as a field. And now I thought I'd share with you my kind of 3 simple steps of applying behavioural science. So the first step is to define your problem in terms of a set of behaviours. So the problem that you are working towards solving should always be defined as a set of behaviours that you want people to do. And this makes it really action oriented. And obviously now you know what you need people to do. And then you might do some refining of figuring out which are the key behaviours. The second step is understanding. So understanding your audiences and understanding those behaviours and what would move them towards doing those behaviours, carrying those out, or might prevent them. I'm going to go a little bit in, I'm going to explain a little bit more about the understand side in a second, but not too much. And then the third and final step is to test and learn. So any changes that you make from understanding your audience and the behaviours, you must always test them, because then you know if it's actually having an impact and how it's having an impact. And one thing here, some people shy away from testing because they're worried about failure. And it's not actually a failure. So if you find out something you've implemented doesn't work, well, then it doesn't work. That's great. But sometimes you might realize that it does have an impact, but it has a really negative impact. And you shouldn't be worried about finding that out, because it's really important that you know what to stop doing or what not to do. And the final thing to say about on this slide is that you'll notice it's not a linear process. It's not a one-time thing. It's something that you need to be repeating. So you should always be every now and then coming back and thinking, are those the right behaviours and actions that we want to target? Is this the right audience? Do we still know enough about the audience? Do we need to revisit it? And always testing and learning. So I said I'd come back to this step about understanding your audiences, and I'm going to be really brief here. So this is something we're really passionate about at Reflect, because if you don't understand your audiences fully, and I don't just mean segmenting your audiences into demographics here, I mean really kind of understanding what it is that unconsciously or emotionally or irrationally drives them towards something. If you don't understand that, then you can't be creating content that really resonates with your audience. You're not engaging them fully. And then obviously you're not gaining their kind of long-term support and loyalty and trust. So a framework that we use at Reflect, one of the frameworks we use to help profile and understand your audiences, is something called Monkey, Lion, Dog. I am actually going to really annoyingly leave it there for you and leave you in suspense, but take a note of the link, or you've got the QR code there that you can scan on your phone and put it to the side and come back to it after this webinar. You can read more about it, and you can take a little quiz there as well to see whether you are more monkey, lion, or dog. Okay, and now you might be wondering, so you've got this basic understanding, you might be wondering, how can you apply behavioural science to your digital marketing and digital fundraising? Well, this slide here is really just to show you that you can pretty much apply it kind of everywhere. You can apply it throughout all your channels and your assets. And obviously I won't have time to talk about all of them today and give examples of all, but I just really wanted to highlight the different areas that you can use behavioural science. So moving on to some interesting stats. So obviously those of you on the call today will already know a lot about digital fundraising, but when I was doing my research for this talk, I came across some of these stats that I thought were quite interesting to share. So online donations have risen 78% since 2017, and this research was carried out last year, so pretty up-to-date information. And the research also shows that a huge chunk of younger generations are donating to charity every year, which is brilliant. And that's really important to think about because obviously younger generations are spending every kind of waking minute online. So we need to be thinking about how our digital strategies are targeting younger generations as well. And a really obvious finding is that younger generations are the most likely to donate online as well. But I don't want you to be fooled into thinking that you need to be putting all your efforts towards targeting younger generations, because researchers also found that almost half of the donations that were made from over 65-year-olds were made online as well. So you really do have pretty much everyone online. But the important thing is understanding how those different generations, how those different audiences act and react online as well. And I thought this was a really key finding here, that 1 in 3 adults won't donate to charity if they can't donate online. So it's really important that you have, you know, a system online that you can donate through. And I know the majority of you will have already, but I thought what I'd like to point out here is also have a think about how easy it is to donate online via your website, how attractive or appealing it is too, because if it's not attractive, easy or appealing to donate online, then I would say you're probably losing a good chunk of people to that as well. And now I wanted to talk about something called the action intention gap. So this is the idea that we all have intentions, and we say, I'm going to do something, and we really do believe we're going to, and we plan to, and then it doesn't happen. You know, the gym is a great example. We might even sign up and get a membership, and we might even book a class, but sometimes we just don't do it. So that is the gap, the action intention gap. It's that black hole of what went wrong there. And in terms of charitable donations, I thought this was a really interesting stat that we found from our own polling, was that 22% of people intend to donate to charity, but just don't. And this is where behavioural science can be really helpful in figuring out what happened. How can we shorten that gap? How can we understand what's going on in that black hole? So in order to apply behavioural science to your charitable fundraising, you need to be understanding human biases. And when I'm talking about human bias, I'm talking about cognitive bias. And this is the kind of definition of cognitive bias here. So it's a systematic error in the way that we think and the way that we process information that leads us to flawed thoughts and flawed decision-making. So in a nutshell, cognitive bias is the tendency that us humans have to make illogical decisions. And don't worry, I'll give you a few examples of biases as well. A nudge, which some of you may have heard of already, is one way of working with these human biases to encourage a desired behaviour. And a definition of a nudge is a small tweak that we can make to the environment, and that can be the physical environment, like the red button example, changing things to get in the way of the red button, or it can be the online environment as well. And these small tweaks can have a positive and sometimes a really big impact on behaviour. And the important point here is without limiting choice. So all the options are still available to people when we use nudges. We're not taking an option away. We're not forcing a behaviour. All of the options there, we're just making one particular behaviour a little bit more attractive or a little bit easier to do. So let's look at some examples of those biases and nudges together. So the first one I want to talk to you about is present bias. And this is the tendency to prioritise immediate rewards over future rewards. So even if future rewards are objectively better, a great example of this is procrastination. Okay, so we know that if we get on with the thing we're supposed to get on with, future us will thank ourselves. Future us will have, the reward will be that we can spend more time doing something else, or it gets us to the next task and so on. But present us doesn't want to do that because it's much more enjoyable to watch another show on Netflix, or spend five more minutes scrolling on Instagram or something like that. So we are not rationally prioritizing the immediate rewards we get over the future rewards by getting up and doing the thing we're supposed to be doing. So if we think about present bias in terms of charitable donations, the stat that I shared with you a moment ago, that 22% of people intend to donate but don't, well, perhaps there's a little bit of present bias going on there. Perhaps what they were doing in the present moment when they intended to donate just was much more rewarding to them than actually parting with their hard-earned money, even if it is for a good cause. And then another stat that we found from our own polling is that 28% of people were unhappy with how much they currently donate and actually want to donate more. And my question is, well, why aren't they? You know, on the face of it, it's really easy to donate to charity. So why aren't they doing it? And again, one of the many reasons could be due to present bias. So having a look at ways that we can overcome present bias, one of the ways is delaying the pain. So it's an emotional sort of pain to get on with the task that we want to do, whether that's parting money or, you know, doing a piece of work. So one way in which we can do this is we can delay the pain and we can put it in the future. An example here is the Give More Tomorrow scheme. So this is a scheme that was aimed at people who were making regular donations to charity, and the charities wanted them to increase the annual donation that we're making, obviously to keep up in line with inflation and rising costs and so on. And what this set of studies did was they tested different ways of asking people to consider increasing their contribution. So the first way is the way in which you would think you ask people. So can you consider increasing your contribution with X amount, say £5 a year? And then the second way of asking people was the exact same, but this time saying starting in month Y. So we're in March at the moment. I might say, could you consider increasing your contribution starting in September? So you're not starting it today. And what the studies found was that asking for those future commitments to donation increases was effective. So people did agree to it. More people agreed to it when we asked them to, not we, sorry, the researchers asked them to do it in the future than asking them to do it today. And not only that, it was sustained in the long term. So the researchers went back and looked at the data 6 months later and 12 months later and found that those people who said, yes, I'll donate in September, for example, when it got to September, they stuck to their commitment and they continued to. They weren't likely to cancel. Now, this is a really great opportunity for you to try it out in your email marketing if you're not already with your regular donors and see, and obviously you can test out, so you can send out different versions to different donors and see which one works better. Another bias that I want to talk about is anchoring bias. So this is the tendency to fixate on a target number or value and then make decisions based around that value. So if I was trying to sell you a t-shirt, for example, and I said it's £150, that would sound outrageous for just a t-shirt. And then if I tried to sell you a t-shirt for £35, you're more likely to buy the £35 t-shirt. Whereas if I tried to sell you a £35 t-shirt versus I don't know, normal price t-shirt, you'd go for the normal price and think 35 was expensive. But in the first example, where I've anchored you to the £150, that's really high. In comparison, £35 is really cheap. So we can use anchoring to overcome present bias as well. And this is another example here of a set of studies that tested out how to get regular donors to increase their annual donations as well. And this was using anchoring. So again, two groups of people were asked in slightly different ways. The first group were asked if they would like to increase their annual donation, and then they were given suggested increases of certain amounts. And obviously, they always had the option to just choose what amount they wanted as well. And the suggested increases for group one were £1, £2, £3, £5, or £10. And then group two will ask the same thing, but you can see that the suggested increase is that tiny bit higher. So anchoring people to a higher value, £2, £4, £6, £8, or £10. And as you can see from the bar chart there, the second group actually resulted in much higher increases. So just over £800 compared to the first way of asking resulted in just over £300. So even though it's you're anchoring them to not an extreme amount of money, it just that tiny bit higher can make such a big difference. So friends of the earth, I believe you're on the call today, and don't worry, you're not the only ones I've picked on, but I've taken a screenshot from your website today. I hope you don't mind. And you can see here you've got a brilliant way of presenting the donation box. And you have got suggested donation amounts on there, which is fantastic. And importantly, you've got that other button as well, so people can decide what amount that they want to donate. What I'm wondering is, if you may have already tested this, but if you haven't, what would happen if you increased the £15 to a higher amount? Say, I don't know, £30, that's just off the top of my head. And maybe if you increase the £10 to £11 or £12 maybe, I wonder what would happen. I wonder if people would see that higher amount and think, oh, that's a little bit too high. And then actually more people might select the middle option rather than the lower option. So I'd be really interested if you do this and test it out. Let us know how it goes. And remember, you could have different landing pages, so you can test out different versions at the same time, and then come back to us and let us know what happens. So the next bias to talk about is loss aversion. So we're more motivated to avoid losses than we are to gain gains. And a good example of that is losing £100 feels much worse to us than the joy of gaining £100. So what that means is, when in our behaviours, we're much more motivated to stop ourselves from losing something or losing out on something than we are to win something or gain something. And again, I'll talk you through some examples to make it a little clearer for you. Now, we can't pretend that donating to charity isn't losing money. Yes, it's a lovely thing to do. The reward is that you're helping other people. It's a really altruistic thing to do, but we are parting with our really hard-earned money, and that's painful to us. So one scheme that can help with that loss aversion is the Give As You Earn scheme. So I'm sure you're all aware of it. But I'll just explain it anyway. The Give As You Earn scheme is a payroll giving scheme. So just like we pay our taxes out of our salary before we receive the money, it's the same thing. You can donate to charity from your gross salary rather than your net salary. And this reduces those feelings of loss because it's donated from that gross salary before we've even received the money. So it doesn't really feel like we've done anything. It doesn't really feel like we've given any money away, which is fantastic. However, not many people know about it and not many people do it. So research has shown that over 80% of employers do not offer it as a scheme, and only 4% of employees are signed up. And then our own polling also found that 45% were unaware. So almost half of the population are unaware that Give As You Earn is even a thing that you can do. So this is a really good opportunity here for you to raise that awareness about Give As You Earn schemes and to target your paid ads at employers and business owners and not just general public for donations as well. Okay, so the next one is friction costs. So we're deterred from taking action by seemingly small barriers. So remember, I said humans are lazy. The simplest of things can get in our way, and it's really irrational. For example, if I'm buying something online and the website doesn't use PayPal or something similar, and I find I have to go and get my bank card and get the card reader. If it's something that I don't really urgently need to buy, I will abandon that basket and I might not come back to it. And really, when you think about it, it would take me 5 seconds or maybe 30 seconds to find my card reader and plug it in and do what I need to do. And remember that those stats I showed you at the beginning as well, that 22% of people intend to donate, but then they don't. So maybe there are some really small barriers that are just getting in their way. And we can remove these friction costs. We can remove these small barriers by simply changing the default option. So another example of a set of studies here that used a Give As You Earn scheme, so that payroll scheme that I was just talking about. This company in particular actually had real success in getting their employees to sign up to the Give As You Earn scheme. It was about 50% of the company were signed up, which was fantastic. But then they also had this kind of add-on scheme that you could join, which meant that your annual donations would automatically increase by 3% every year. So you wouldn't have to opt in every year to increase your donations, which is fantastic. But what they found was that this wasn't really happening. So although lots of people signed up to the Give As You Earn scheme, not many people were signing up to the optional kind of add-on part of it. And what the studies did was simply make that an opt-out. So automatically, all of those people who were already enrolled in the Give As You Earn scheme were also then enrolled in the kind of additional 3% scheme as well. And they obviously still had the choice to come out of that scheme, but just by changing it to an opt-out scheme, you can see in the bar chart there what a massive increase it had. Now, a really, really important point here, and you're probably already thinking it, is when you're changing to opt-out, you need to make sure that you clearly and openly communicate that change to opt-out and communicate all the options that are available. Because obviously, if people aren't really aware that they've been moved from opt-in to opt-out, then that's where it becomes a little bit unethical. So you need to make sure that if you do make changes like that, you're doing it really clearly. So I said that Friends of the Earth wouldn't be the only ones to be picked on today. So next up, it's Bernardo's. So you have got, again, a lovely donation box here on your website, which is fantastic. And you can see that you've used defaults already. So when I landed on this page, the default option that's highlighted is single donation and £50, which is great. But I'm wondering, and again, you may have already tested this out, but I'm wondering what would happen if the default option that was highlighted was monthly donation. Would you actually end up getting more regular donors? And when you average it out, would you end up getting more in terms of the amount of money donated to if you had more monthly donors? So again, please test it out and let us know what you find as well, just having a play around with the different ways of highlighting the default donation method. Okay, moving on to social norms. So these are unwritten rules and set behaviours that members of a group or a society are expected to follow. So if you think about how you behave at work and how you behave in a restaurant or in a supermarket, we behave differently in different environments around different people, and nobody tells us how to behave or how to dress in those examples. We just know. So they're unwritten rules and expectations. And really, we're sheep. So we just follow what other people do. We follow what's expected of us. And you can use this as well to work with those human biases. So another example, British Heart Foundation, I believe some of you are on the call today as well. I took this from your Instagram, and I'm not actually sure if you consciously knew and intended to use social norms as a nudge here or not, but you posted this as information about Free Wills Month, and that over 50% of your research is funded by gifts and wills, which is incredible. But what it is doing here is also using social norms messaging, because over 50% of the research being funded is a big chunk. And what that is saying to us might not be us rationally or consciously thinking this, but what it's saying to us is that a lot of people are donating via their wills. And now if you are someone who hasn't set that up, haven't sorted your will, and you haven't left a gift in your will, then it makes you think, oh, maybe I should do that. So that's a social norm. And British Heart Foundation, if you haven't already, again, I wonder what would happen if you could test out different messages of encouraging people to donate via their will. So whether this is an email campaign or a social media campaign or online, you could test out one message that's written like this using a social norm, and perhaps another message that just simply asks people, would you or could you consider leaving a gift in your will? So with social norms, there's plenty of opportunities to use this kind of messaging and this kind of nudge across all of your channels. It really is a really nice, kind of easy one to implement as well. The final point I want to make on nudges in particular is making sure that you're always testing them. So I kind of relayed the importance of testing at the beginning, but really testing them and then building up. So it can be really tempting when you see all these great studies and it seems so simple and like little tweaks that you employ and it makes a big impact. It can be tempting to just throw a load of nudges in. But if you do that, you can't be sure which nudge is working and why, or maybe which nudge isn't working. So I would really encourage you to just employ one nudge at a time, test it, figure out if it's working and what it's doing. And if you're happy with it, then build on another nudge and see how that works. Okay, so now this is the second half of the webinar. We're moving away from those little tweaks that you can make and more into the space of thinking from a behavioural perspective and thinking strategically as well. So the first thing that I want to share is that statistics are not always helpful. Now, this is a bit of a tricky one when it comes to charities, because obviously statistics are really important. You want people to know about the issue that you're trying to help, and often that involves statistics. You want people to know about the good work you're doing and the impact you've had, and often that involves statistics, but they're not always helpful in getting people to do what you want them to do. So in this case, in getting people to support your charity and donate. And an example of this is, I just want to get you all to do a little task here. Please don't look this up. Please don't calculate it. But if you could take maybe 5 to 10 seconds, pop in the chat box how long you think 1 million seconds is. You can use any unit you like that makes sense to you, whether you convert it to minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years, whatever you like. How long do you think 1 million seconds is? Becky, I'm going to leave it to you to read some out as they come in, please.
So we've got 2 so far. We've got 6 weeks. We've got 2 months, 4 weeks. It's a really hard one. 7 days, 3 weeks, 12 weeks, 2 weeks, 5 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 days, 4 weeks. There you go. A lot of different answers. A month.
Okay, great. If I've suddenly got a bit darker, it's because I'm not moving enough, so the lights have turned off, but that's fine. Yes, you can see there's so much variation there in your answers. And actually, 1 million seconds is around 12 days. So well done to those of you that were close to 12 days. But there was huge variation in there. But now that you know that 1 million seconds is 12 days, what if I asked you how long 1 billion seconds is? So again, same rules apply. Please don't look it up. Please don't calculate it. Just take a few seconds to guesstimate.
So we've got 32 years, 35 years, 1 year, 2 years, and there's no silly answers, guys. I had no idea when you did this with me. I was like, my mind just glowed. 18 months, 4 years, 10 months. No clue. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know either. 34 years. Go on, put us out of our misery, Kiran.
Okay, so 1 billion seconds is around 32 years. So well done to the first couple of people who absolutely got that right. That's very impressive. But the point is, we are really bad at this task. I mean, I've presented these 2 things a lot of times, and I still can't remember how many years or days they are. And the point here is that we're not meant to be good at it. Okay, so we're not good with big numbers. Yes, we know that 1 million is a big number. We know that 1 billion is a big number, but it's totally meaningless to us because we don't deal with millions and billions every single day. So when we talk about 1 million, how something has affected 1 million people, for example, it doesn't really do much in terms of our understanding. And now I'm going to quote Stalin, apparently, as with all the historical quotes, we can never be too sure. And now, while this isn't a very nice quote to quote, it is a really relevant one. So a single death is a tragedy and 1 million deaths is a statistic. And that's true. When we hear about the story of one person dying, we're quite often really moved by it. When we hear about 1 million people dying, we might also say that's really heartbreaking, it's really sad. We'll look at that situation. We know it's objectively sad, but then we get on with our day. It doesn't emotionally move us enough. So if you're thinking about trying to get people on board with your cause and trying to get them to support it, communicating that might not always be helpful. Now, I'm not saying that you should avoid big numbers altogether, because, you know, I'm not saying that you shouldn't tell people how many people it's affected, but the point is, make those big numbers meaningful, make it so that it resonates and it engages your audience. So let's take the example of the Turkey-Syria earthquake back in February this year. So it caused damage to an area that's approximately 350,000 kilometers squared. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, that's meaningless. I mean, I'm not so great with estimations anyway of miles, kilometers, whatever it is. But for most of us, we can't really picture what that is. But if I was to say to you, well, it caused damage to an area the size of Germany, that makes it a little bit easier to understand. So you also have an opportunity here to make it relevant to the particular audience that you're speaking to as well. So again, using the Turkey-Syria earthquake as an example, but this time looking at how many people were made homeless as a result, it was 1.5 million people. Yes, we can all agree that is a lot of people. There's no questioning that, but how meaningful is that to me? At the moment, not many, not really meaningful, sorry. But this is a great opportunity here to target your comms based on your audience's location. So, oh, right, I don't know if that's on my screen. It's half loaded the next slide. How's it looking for you?
We can see it, that's fine.
You can see a map, can you?
Yeah.
I'm just going to flick back and back forward in case it helps me. Yes, it does. Okay. Yeah, if I was to say the number of people made homeless is almost equivalent to the entire population of Kent, that's where I am right now, that's definitely more meaningful to me. And then in the interest of balance, let's go to Lancashire. So if you've got an audience in Lancashire, for example, you might say the number of people made homeless is equivalent to the entire population of Lancashire. And then similarly, Dorset. So actually there it's double the entire population of Dorset. So you can see how making those numbers relevant to who you're speaking to suddenly has a lot more meaning, and it will have a lot more impact, and it's much more likely to move people to do something about it. And here's a little bit of proof from one of our clients. So we worked with Christian Aid, and the top screenshot you can see here is from when they were appealing to help the Ukrainian people after the war broke out. And you can see that given clear information, over 3.6 million people have fled their homes. And again, we know that's a huge amount of people. We know it's a terrible situation. But what is more moving is to make that a bit more emotional. So what we did was we took out the figure completely, and we said this is the biggest refugee crisis since World War II. Now, admittedly, most of us weren't alive in World War II, so we don't have that first-hand experience, but we do know a lot about World War II, and we do know about the displacement that it caused as well. So this is emotionally speaking to people rather than using facts and figures. And you can see there on the right-hand side of the screen that it actually resulted, this small change that we did actually resulted in an increase of 23% click-through rate, and then a nearly 100% increase in the amount of donations. And when you're thinking about large numbers, I want you to be thinking about it in terms of the images that you present to, and not just the statistics. So here on the left, again, is a picture of Ukrainian people fleeing their homes at a train station. And you can see it's huge. The people go on, the queue goes on for ages. And it is, objectively, it's a terrible image. And we know that the situation isn't a good one. But again, we're likely to see it and just get on with our day. Whereas the picture on the right there of a Ukrainian mother with her 2 young children is so much more emotionally moving that image is going to stick with us. And that image is going to make us do something about it, because when we donate or send clothes or whatever it is that we do, we're going to have those people in our mind. And this is something called the identifiable victim effect. And there is plenty of research to back this up, that we are more likely to support a cause or do something to help a single person, or in this case, that family, over a large group of people. And more importantly, when they're identifiable rather than anonymous. So we know a bit about them, maybe we can see a picture of them, maybe we even know their name. We're much more moved emotionally, and therefore likely to carry out something like donating. And a really good sounds like the wrong word to use, but example of that is the tragic case of Aylan Kurdi. So if this isn't ringing a bell yet, it might when I say this, that a few years ago in 2015, there was the image of a 3-year-old boy who had washed up on the shores of Turkey. Him and his family were fleeing Syria and unfortunately didn't make that journey. Now, this isn't the first time that we had heard about the refugee crisis and people trying to flee their homes and not quite surviving the journey. But because this wasn't an image of lots of people, and likely also because it was an image of a small boy as well. It really hit home. You know, it was all over the front pages of the newspapers, and the rhetoric around it completely changed as well. And this graph shows the Google search trends overnight, and you can see that the massive increase in the number of people that were searching for Syria and refugees, and then Aylan's name as well. And not only did this increase people's interest or curiosity, and they started Googling more about this, but it actually made people do something. So the Migrant Offshore Aid Station received £180,000 of donations in just 24 hours. And that's a 15-fold increase compared to their average donation as well. Now, on that point, I do want to say, choose your imagery carefully. So obviously the image of little Aylan wasn't a pleasant image. It did have a huge impact, but that is not me saying that you need to go and find devastatingly emotional images to convince people, because actually sometimes when you use images like that, we just want to bury our heads in the sand because it's way too emotional and it's too big for us to deal with. So we're not moved to do it. So it is, you can see there's a little bit of an art to it as well. So what kind of emotions might be helpful to get people to kind of donate? What kind of emotions do you want to bring out of your audiences? Well, one that you might want to think about is moral elevation. So this is a positive emotion experienced when witnessing a virtuous act, one that improves the welfare of others. So basically, it's that feeling of that warm, glowy, uplifting feeling when we see something inspiring happening, we see someone doing something good for somebody else. So when you see what a charity does and the outcome, that warm feeling that you get from that, that's moral elevation. Now, a set of studies tested out moral elevation and outrage and wanted to figure out which one is more likely to get people to move to support and donate to a charity. So these studies showed different groups of people, different videos, and one was designed to make people feel outrageous at the situation and hopefully then want to do something about it. And the other was designed to make people feel that moral elevation about the same situation. And what the studies found was that moral elevations, that warm, uplifting feeling, increases the likelihood of people donating to charity. But not only does it increase the likelihood of them donating, but it also increases the amount that they donate as well. Whereas outrage doesn't really work to move people to donate to your charity, but what it does do is it increases the likelihood of them engaging in pro-social political behaviours. So those are behaviours like protesting, lobbying, joining challenge groups that will challenge world leaders about the situation. So if you want people to do that, then you probably want to get them all fired up and feeling quite angry about the situation. But if you want people to donate, you probably want to use that moral elevation and get them feeling uplifted and in awe. And here's a really lovely example of moral elevation in practice. So this image here is actually a picture of the photo frame that's on the wall in my kids' bedroom. And it's a lovely charity called Pregnancy Twinning. And what the idea is when you are pregnant or a friend or whoever is pregnant, you donate to the charity and they twin your pregnancy with a mum and baby in Malawi. Who is in need of support, and usually the due dates are around the same time as well. And then you're presented with this lovely framed certificate as well, picture of mum and baby smiling. You get a little bit of information about them both, their name, the gender, and a little bit of information about the birth and the health of mum and baby as well. So you can see that's really lovely and really uplifting. Let's compare it to this photo here. This is a picture of a mum and baby living in poverty in need of support. It's a sad image, it's a sad situation, but does it move us emotionally enough to want to do something about it, or does it actually leave us feeling a little bit helpless and like our support's not really going to do much? So now, thinking about this pregnancy twinning example, and all of the things, I know that I've spoken through a lot of things today, but just try to have a think back to all of the things that I presented today and see how many kind of nudges and different techniques you can list that you think pregnancy twinning have engaged in here as well. So again, answers in the chat box, and you might even identify some that I haven't spoken about today as well, and that's fantastic if you do.
While everyone's having a think, I suppose I'm just trying to think. We've not tested this actually to see what ones I can pick out. Putting myself on the spot here. I guess, is there kind of a bit of social proof in there, or not so much?
There could be. Do you want to expand?
Well, I'm trying to get my head around it, thinking about what you were saying about social proof earlier. But I suppose just thinking, I guess it's the relatedness, isn't it? So it's maybe it's not social proof, but it's feeling related and you're in something together and you feel like you're having an impact. We've just got a response here. So name of the mother and baby, so they are identifiable and not anonymous. So that's really good. We've got choose your images carefully. So this isn't statistic based. They've created an emotional connection between the mums, definitely. Were there any other ones, Kiran, you had on your mind?
Yeah, so let me reveal some of them. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so there are a lot of things going on here. Actually, I didn't mention trust today, but the first thing is trusting where the money's going. It's proof straight away. This is what's happening. And that is obviously building into that moral elevation as well. It avoids meaningless stats. So I still know a little bit of information about mum and baby, but I don't need to know any stats that don't really affect me. Imagery, someone said about imagery and identifiable victim effect. Rewards as well. So this was actually really rewarding to donate to this charity because I got this lovely photo frame as well. And I know that seems so silly, something so small, but it really is. And, you know, I was actually gifted this for my first baby at my baby shower. But then when I had my second, I went out and I said, I want another certificate. I want to support another mum. I want to twin my second pregnancy. So that for me was my reward as well.
Amazing. And a few other people have put very similar things to what you've got here. So loss aversion, I guess, perhaps because you've received a certificate in return for your donation, giving the insight, transparency, the present bias, images. Yeah. Brilliant.
Good stuff. Thank you, everyone. So to wrap up this webinar, humans are lazy and irrational, and we need to figure out a way to work with that laziness and irrationality to help people to move towards supporting your charity. So we use behavioural science to work with those flaws and not against them. And we do that by making things relatable. So like we've seen with the images, make it relatable, make the statistics that you're sharing relatable as well, targeting your ads and your comms, depending on where people are and who they are as well. And if you're thinking about trying to encourage people to donate specifically, then choosing elevation over outrage is key. And then finally, remembering those 3 simple steps to applying behavioural science. So define in terms of a set of behaviours, understand your audiences, and you must test and learn from those as well. So thank you so much for joining me today. I think we should have time for a few questions, but there's a QR code there to download the slides, and if we run out of time to answer your question, you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy for you to contact me on there. And there was also the monkey line dog slides as well, link as well, that you'll get when you download these slides.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kiran. That was absolutely brilliant. We've got some questions that came in a bit earlier, and then I'll jump to the bottom because I think there's some new messages that have popped up. But just going back, so Chioma put a comment or a question in. So this was when you were talking about making statistics relevant, so using Kent as an example. So how do you apply this to a social media messaging with a diverse population?
Yeah, so then I would go with something that's more general. So if you're mainly going to be speaking to people within the UK, for example, on your social media, then making it more relevant to the whole of UK. Like I use that example of the devastation from the earthquake affecting the area the size of Germany. obviously we're not in Germany, but it's close enough that we know how big Germany is. So thinking about something that would apply more generally to the population that you're speaking to as well.
That makes sense. And also, I suppose, just on my side, just thinking, if you were going to use this in a paid ad campaign, you actually can target it. So actually, to your audience in Kent, you could have an advert that used Kent as the example, and your Lancashire audience could have Lancashire. So okay, cool. So then we've got Karen's asked, would you test emotional statement versus facts and figures separately to one/many image? What would your approach to testing be?
So the question was, do you test emotional text versus statistical, and then something about images?
Yeah, so would you test emotional statement versus facts and figures separately to one/many image? So I guess it's more about like, are we trying too many things at once? Should we just try and change the text, or should we try and change the image, or should we do them separately or together?
Yeah, so I think a good rule of thumb is only change one thing at a time. So you don't have to just do A/B testing. You can do multivariate testing. So you've got sample A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So you can have different versions, and that you figure out what's working. And then once you've got, say, 3 things that you know are working, why not test combining 2 of those and see if the combination works? Sometimes it might not. So when you're testing, only change one thing at a time.
Perfect. So we've got lots of people saying thank you and that they've really enjoyed it. So that's lovely. Someone's asked, could we put the QR code back on screen for a minute? So while I ask the next questions, if you could do that, that would be awesome. Then we've got Lauren's asked, so do you have any more string examples of strong, I imagine that's meant to be, strong examples of effective moral elevation in donation asks?
Yeah, so not off the top of my head, but I actually did speak to the academic that ran all those studies that I showed you today on moral elevation, and she said that since doing those studies, there's been a lot more in that space with charities and moral elevation. So I can definitely dig some out. Obviously, you can have a search as well, but there's definitely some more examples out there now.
Definitely. Okay, Lauren, so we'll try and come back to you on that one. Do you have any advice for choosing price points for donations? So, for example, £25 could buy arts and crafts materials, or £50 could pay for a therapy session.
Yeah, this is actually one that Becky and I spoke about when we were putting this together. We were wondering about sharing some of those examples. And again, I think it's a case of just having to test what works, because different contexts, different charities will work differently. So we were looking at one where a certain amount of donation did something for a school, and then the next highest donation amount did something for a community. And I was thinking, oh, actually, I'm more personally kind of driven towards helping a whole school of children. That feels a bit more rewarding to me, that, you know, that image of lots of children are getting access to this versus a community. And I know objectively and rationally, a community is that you're reaching a much larger proportion of people in a community versus a school. But we were having that conversation, weren't we, about, I wonder if actually a cumulative effect would work better. So by saying the next donation up would help the school plus the community, or plus however many people. So again, I think testing it out like that, but I'm afraid I don't have any examples off the top of my head of what definitely works in that space.
Yeah, I definitely think it's test and learn, isn't it? And it goes back to that really understanding your audience, because I think also when Kiran and I were having that conversation, Kiran's got 2 children of school age. So again, that's more of a draw into school, because that's something that's really relevant in your life right now compared to thinking community necessarily. So it's starting to know your audience and understanding what would motivate them. But yeah, we really, I think I said about the cumulative idea. It's like when you're buying like a SaaS software product, and it's like in package 1, you get this, and in package 2, you get all of that plus this. It's almost like trying to it's not this or that, it's this and that. So obviously that needs to make sense within your charity and within actually what's possible, because we don't want to be stretching the truth of how money can be spent. But it's starting to think, is there a way to do that so that people feel by giving more, they're actually doing everything, as it were. So really good. There's been lots of really good comments. I think I had one other question, and then we're going to do the survey. So Are there any times that we should use nudges or should not use nudges? Is there any kind of rules around that in your mind? Or is there anything like we need to be cautious about when we're thinking about nudges?
Yeah, so I think as long as we're thinking about human behavior, trying to get someone to do something, then nudges always have their place. Behavioral science always has its place there. But you do need to be careful and be thinking about ethically, are you nudging them towards the right thing? So behavioral science and nudges were designed as a field to get people to move into the positive and desirable behaviors, and not actually this more sinister side, which is known more as a sludge. It's kind of the dark side of a nudge. So definitely always make sure that it's you're encouraging behaviors that are for that person's own good, or in this case, obviously charitable good. Another one, social norms, actually, that's a really good question, because social norms, I mentioned, it's a really, really easy nudge to implement. Loads of people can understand it really easily and just and get on with it. But it's one that we have to be really careful about. And again, test on maybe a smaller population before rolling it out across all campaigns, because sometimes they backfire. So a great example, I saw it in my own doctor's surgery, but it's been documented in research as well, was a message that was put up to say, this many people have missed their appointments this month, don't be one of them. But actually, where the number was so high, what it was communicating was that it's the total norm to miss your doctor's appointment. So they can have a backfire effect there. So really think about what it is that you're communicating with a social norm, and in fact, if the numbers are on the right side to be using a social norm, and obviously test it as well.
Definitely. And I guess another quick thing to mention, you saw within the webinar, there was a couple of statistics that came from research that we've done. So we're currently working on writing up a white paper and a research piece around some polling that we did earlier this month. So watch this space. Everyone that's been to this webinar, we will be following up with you with that in the next month or so, so that you've got that, and potentially we can look at putting on another event if there's more to talk about, or if we get lots of questions back in as well. So I just want to say thank you all so much for attending today, and a massive thank you to Kiran for all the work that she's put in and fabulous delivery.